You are watching the video version of the Marketing Should Be Fun podcast. We are so glad that you are here. If you prefer to listen to podcasts, you can find the Marketing Should Be Fun show on any of your favorite podcast platforms, whether that's Apple Podcasts, Spotify, anywhere else. But most of all, we're so glad you're here, and I hope that you enjoy today's conversation. Well, welcome back to another episode of Marketing Should Be Fun. My name is Austin Savage, founder of Savage Content Collective, and I'm here with my good friend, Kelsey Zarkos, the founder of Curate Social. Kelsey, happy recording day. Should this episode be like Christmas themed now that we're like theming all of our episodes?
Maybe. I mean, you do have like a little Santa stocking situation happening back there.
Isn't this little Santa so cool?
That's adorable.
Look, he's playing golf.
Oh my goodness, stop. That's amazing. I don't have a Santa playing golf, but I do have my Christmas tree up. So that's my contribution.
I do think that makes your screen more festive than mine. So I do think that you win this battle.
Obviously, it was the competition. So glad we'll win it.
Everything is, don't you know, as Enneagram 3s.
Your Enneagram 3 podcast hosts.
We have to be the best. I don't know that I actually think that way, but maybe I do subconsciously.
This comes out in your Christmas decor competitions.
Exactly. Yeah. Do you is every room in your house decorated right now, or is it like just the main room?
No, I actually don't have any of my Christmas stuff out yet. Actually, if you can see on the video version, my frame TV screen is still fall. Those are pumpkins. I need to get on my but I put my tree up every year, like November 1st, because it doesn't have ornaments on it yet. I just love the twinkle lights and it's my favorite thing. So I want as many months of it as possible.
Wait, you haven't even put ornaments on your tree?
Well, because I put it up on October 31st. Couldn't put ornaments on it that day.
Well,
it'll come.
We have put up our ornaments, and we also got cats this year. And let me tell you, having a Christmas tree with cats, it's different. They literally will climb the inside up to the top, and it is insane. And we've shattered so many ornaments.
Oh, sad. We haven't had a puppy yet. This will be our first Christmas with a dog, and so we'll see what happens once we put our ornaments on. How she does.
Crazy. Kelsey, what's our this or that for today? We've got a fun one. I'm excited.
I know this episode I'm really excited about. We also don't have our normal recording equipment. And so I feel like we're like, what do I do with my hands? Usually you have your hands on usually you're always tightening your microphones, your thing.
I know. I know. I feel like we're just on a meeting right now.
I know.
My wife stole my microphone because she has a podcast and they were recording an episode today. And I was like, it's fine. I'll figure it out.
It's all good. So. I'm actually vibing with it. It feels very chill and conversational. So anyway, this or that, even though we just talked about Christmas decorations, is actually going to be a little different. This will go out after Thanksgiving. So I felt like we've run the gauntlet of Thanksgiving, this or that. I was thinking, since we're going to, spoiler alert, talk about a little bit of 2024 in review and some, content marketing trends we're going to do a New Year's Eve themed this or that. So New Year's Eve, your plans, do you prefer going out, staying in?
Wow. I think the only year that we have ever gone out on New Year's Eve or we were intended to go out, I should say, on New Year's Eve was we were on our honeymoon. We were staying in Asheville, North Carolina. And for the day of New Year's Eve, we drove down to Greenville, South Carolina. And we'd done so because we wanted to see the city. But my boss at the time also lived there. We were like, I live in Illinois. He lived in South Carolina. We were like, yeah, let's go visit. And
I love
anyways,
him on your honeymoon.
I don't know. It was a new job. I just wanted to. I'm an Enneagram 3. We got to impress people. But we stayed there for the day, and then we were driving back that night, and we had planned to go out in Asheville. And there was something called ice fog. And so as we were driving back, it's there's no rain or anything, but the fog up in the mountains just freezes immediately to the road. And so there were cars off all over the interstate. And we were staying at this Airbnb super high up in the mountains. And they called us and they were like, don't come back. Like you have this tiny little like Toyota Camry that's not going to make it up, the mountain. And so we had to turn around and we ended up spending New Year's Eve at my boss's house because we didn't have money to like pay for something else. So really, I think I've only ever stayed in really at the end of the day.
That's so funny. What a story. I don't think I knew that story. So that's really funny. We would have met you shortly after that. So
that's true. Hilarious. Yeah.
Wow.
We probably didn't think it was that like odd in the moment, but it was just like, okay, this is a change point.
Not quite what you intended for your first married New Year's Eve, but that's fine.
Yeah.
Oh, that's great. I don't know that I've actually gone out a bunch on New Year's Eve. I love a good party though. Like if there's like fun drinks and dancing or whatever, like that was my favorite thing all through college. And then I married someone who just would prefer to stay home, and that's fine. So I could go either way. I think in this season of having little kids, it's just expensive to pay for a babysitter on New Year's Eve. But we've gotten together with like our home group from church and done like a 8:00 ball drop with the kids and like done a big party. And yeah, or sometimes we'll have some friends over and then we can all put our kids to bed and play games to celebrate. So
yeah, that's what I was trying to think of too, is like, I think with kids, which has been at least for the last 4 to 5 years, I think it's just so different because like we'll do the 8 or 9 o'clock like ball drop with friends, but then I think we just go back home and then we're both just asleep before midnight anyways. So I feel like it's just different now.
Yeah. My favorite scene in the movie The Holiday, it's like my favorite Christmas movie, is the New Year's Eve scene, and they play Auld Lang Syne, and it's like a whole thing. And so I love New Year's Eve. So thank you for participating in this themed this or that.
You also are a traditions person, so this makes a lot of sense that you're like, give me the party. I want the themed drinks. Give me the sparkly things.
Song, all of the things. It's true. I am. No apologies.
All of our this or that's have been too long recently, but I do remember I used to work at Express at Water Tower Place in Chicago. Super fancy, fun, And I remember right around New Year's Eve like season every year, like the whole freaking store would change. Like we would get so many sparkling things, sparkly things in on like the women's side. And like people would constantly be coming in for like their New Year's Eve outfits and stuff like that. And it was just so funny to me, just because like that isn't how I think or like how I like go about my life. But it was just kind of fun to like, if people put together these like super fun outfits for New Year's Eve. I love it.
That's true.
It is. So we do have for today's episode, we did want to do just like a kind of look back at 2024. What did we see in content marketing? We just have some things like as we look back at like what changed on Instagram this year, and just of like what are we seeing in the podcast space and email space, even for blogs, for clients, and just like kind of as we look at content marketing as a whole. What did that look like in 2024? What changed? What stayed the same? And so we're going to start with Instagram. Have a bunch here as we just kind of look back at this year. Kelsey, you have no thoughts about what changed or didn't change about Instagram. But then we're going to jump to some of those other topics as well. But I know that you're excited about this one, so I'll throw it to you first. What did you see this past year for Instagram specifically?
I know. I was saying before we started recording that I've just kind of made Instagram my whole personality, and I'm fine with that. It's what I love. It's where I love to be. So I made a whole business out of it, working out. There's so much to share here. And so what I kind of hope to do as we talk about the Instagram side of things, obviously Instagram is a platform that has like so many features, and, we could get very nitty gritty if we wanted to, and we'll run through a few of those. So number one, I hope that, if you're listening and some of these things maybe are new or unfamiliar, it gives you just like 1 or 2 new things you could try moving forward. But also it just reminds me that, we just finished our mini series on the ABCs of content marketing about adding value and building trust and creating community. I think it's really cool to see that everything Instagram rolled out this year really does support those things. And so while there might be new features or new trends or, those things kind of come and go, we've always seen platforms, whether it's Instagram or Threads or, Twitter or X or whatever, those things change. But still at the root of it is that people are there to create, a human connection with someone. And we get to do that in lots of different ways. So with that being said, Here are some of my favorite things that happened on Instagram this year. And feel free to jump in if you have any thoughts of your own on these. Okay. Well, the first thing that's different this year than other years is that Instagram is definitely operating more like a search engine now. They really beefed up their SEO. And so, instead of a couple of years ago when we would like have a hashtag and you could click on that and, see everyone's hashtags, and that's kind of how you categorize your content. Instagram has moved away from that specifically, even though hashtags are still helpful, and really just used keywords and search terms. And so people are using Instagram. And if you think about it yourself as you're listening, you've probably done this, where you'll just pull it up and hit the search bar and type in a phrase, and you're searching for whatever is going to come up. We have not always been able to use Instagram that way. And so I think it's really interesting, even as we create content, just to like have it in the back of our minds of what might someone search for if I was, if they were going to find this. But I just think it makes it a lot more fun to use that, because then you end up seeing your For You feed, which is kind of a newer thing this year, becomes super personalized. Mine's full of, Taylor and Travis and fun activities. And fun activities for kids and like, calligraphy and watercolor art, because I love those kinds of things. And so anyway, it's been fun to see just the change that they've made there.
Yeah, I started to see like more content from like, the Instagram kind of like experts that are like, create content in that front. Just about like, incorporating keywords now into your captions in a more thoughtful way. And, just even, I mean, now that you're able, which we'll talk about in a second, but to create like more content like within the app itself, even the app being able to like understand like what your captions are saying, and, to be able to categorize your content that way is like definitely a solid step in the right direction I think for Instagram. And it's interesting because like you used to be you've been able to search on Instagram for a long time, but it was like, had to be super specific for you to find something you actually wanted. Like if you're looking for like a recipe for something, like you'd be able to find that, or like, different things. But now it's like getting so much more broad, and, like it's even interesting that you can search by like the type of content as well. Like if you're just looking for reels for something specific, if you're looking for, any type of content, I think that's like a really positive trend as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I guess I wasn't even thinking of this originally, but even the way you can search for trending audios now, just by clicking on the little up arrow, I mean, they have made the user experience, even as a creator of content, so much better beyond just even a consumer of content. So there's also been a lot more community features rolled out and just different ways to create community. I think this rolls really well into our most recent episode about creating community, of just that idea of creating a place where people can have a back and forth interaction, and there's not just content being pushed at them through a screen. I personally don't use these as much, but I'm starting to try it out with a client or two and just see what happens. There's the broadcast channel. And I guess the way I would describe this is kind of almost like a Facebook message group.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
Only the person sending the message, so like from your account, is the one who can share information. People are not able to necessarily respond. They can like heart things, kind of like you would on a text message. So it's a great way to communicate information maybe a little bit more personally than like a whole reel. Like you have to opt into this broadcast channel. And then I've seen, a certain client of mine, she's using it to like share out maybe more specific like deals or quick tips or education to her client base, versus like everyone in the world on Instagram hears this. So I do love seeing that. And I love that it's, as much as we talk about back and forth, I do love that it's not just an open message feed, because I think all of us would be by the notification. So it'll be interesting to see how that one continues to roll out, and who opts in and who doesn't. You can also subscribe to, specific content. They've kind of been playing around with this one a lot in the past couple of years, I feel like, with, pay to subscribe versus just, extra free options for people. So those are just ones I'm kind of keeping my eye on. I'm curious what those will kind of morph into.
Yeah, both of those are very interesting to me, because I would say that I'm not like sold on either one. I'm part of like I think the only like broadcast channels I'm part of is like Chicago Bears, some others where they'll post like, like game day stuff where it's just like just to, people. And then you just see like 7,000 people who have like interacted with that, like by hearting it or leaving an
Yeah.
angry face or, whatever they are,
All the
whatever
feelings.
people are feeling. But it is interesting. It's a really good way to get out, especially like timely information, because people are going to be notified about that in the same way that they would be if they got like a message from somebody. And so that much is, a great way to get content out and like ensure that more people are going to see it. So I think that's the positive of it, but like making sure that it's valuable enough that people have a reason to opt in, I think is like the biggest thing that people have to, like really think through to make sure that it's like valuable for it. But subscriptions are interesting to me too, because I'm like, you do have some of those other like membership platforms, like Instagram is still competing against like Patreon for some of that and like different styles of content for those things. And I know like a lot of Instagram creators or Instagram like primary creators are still using like a platform like Patreon or something similar, because there's just more like file types that you could be sharing and just like more just ways to make that valuable for an audience that I think is hard for them to compete with now. But I could be wrong. It'll be interesting to see how that like fleshes out as well.
Yeah. I am really impressed. I feel like this is the first year. Maybe it's that I'm a little bit more just have been in this world for a little bit longer, but I feel like this is the year I've seen the kind of heads of Instagram become like very intentional about trying to be in tune with creators and trying to more understand, how people are using this app to create a community or to share a brand or to grow a business. And so I feel very encouraged by that. And I feel like some of these options just directly relate to the efforts that they're making. So yeah. What I love this year are the interactive features. These are the ones, they're like super tiny things. This is where I say we could get very granular and nitty gritty. When you're creating content, and I mean, specifically for you and I, like when we are creating posts for clients on the daily, these are just fun things to get to like see and try out. I know I'm such an analytics nerd of like, I want to see how somebody interacts with that post versus this one. And so there's so many different things that I've rolled out this year. You can create a poll in your caption where people can, specifically tap into it. We've had those in stories for years, but it just makes another simple way to like capture people's interaction on a post. You can do so many things. You can reply to comments with a reel. You can share, there's comments on your reel that you can click share to story and it'll pop the comment into your story with the reel. So just all these creative, like tiny touches. But when you're using Instagram every day and you're trying to create content that stands out and, gives value to people and invites them to interact, I think these things are actually the ones that add up to make such a big impact, honestly, over time. I think you've seen like some of the newer ones about some accounts have it rolled out where you can comment on their stories now. And so those comments almost stay like Facebook posts. That's very interesting to me. Keeping my eye on. And you can leave a little, it honestly reminds me so much of like way back in the day, Facebook, where you can put a little status on your profile now of like, leaving a note. It gives you like a little prompt or you can share something. But again, it's all of this, like it's new, but it's still the same thing of like, we want to be able to express ourselves. We want to invite people to interact back with it. And so it's just fun to see like that same truth and heart of the matter stays the same. And then there's creative ways to express it that they roll out. And I think it would be so fun to be a fly on the wall in the conference room of Instagram and be like, what made you think of that one? Or, what's coming down the pipe for next year? So it's kind of fun.
Yeah. It is really interesting to see just like all of those features. I know for you and I, it is like, we could put a new sticker on our story or on our, like, we can use this feature. I don't know if you've noticed, but halfway through this year, at least in the past couple months, they've changed how polls and captions are displaying. And I that's really bothered me. I don't know if it's bothered you, but it like hides it now. Like, because it used to be at the top of the caption. And maybe this is going to date this episode because they'll probably fix it in like 2 weeks. But now it's like you have to click like a separate button to actually like vote in the poll, which makes it like much less engaging. But
yeah, I feel like that's still kind of the Wild West of like, is anyone on the back end of this? Does anyone know what's happening? Because then it's, you also can like post like a prompt, but that's different than a caption. And we didn't even talk about this one. Another great thing that happened this year is that you can schedule to Instagram now, like natively in the app. That may have even been at the end of last year. I can't remember, but it's recent. But you cannot schedule a reel if it has a poll on it. So answer me, Instagram.
Yeah. Why does that make sense?
I'm just going to title this episode, Dear Instagram, please fix. for me.
Please fix this. I will say, and I can't remember if this was at the end of last year or the start of this year as well, but there was a little season where I was like using the status updates or like they call them notes for a while, but I don't know that that's actually what they're calling them now. But I was leaving like, it was around the time that I released the affirmation series, I think actually, and I was leaving an affirmation a day because they last for 24 hours.
Yeah.
And I did have a few people who would like notice that I like hadn't posted one for the day, and like I would get like messages about it. And it's like all that to say, with all these new features and things that are like different and, you know, might not be like the style of content that you were used to posting or like pushing you to try things in a different way. Like, don't be afraid. Just like we always say, like, don't be afraid to try these things and see like what works, what connects, what feels right, what doesn't. Because there are some things of like how you can use stuff creatively across the app, since you know that people are spending time on it.
Yeah. Especially with something that feels like so low pressure as some of these like tinier features. That's a great way to be like, let me try it and see what happens if it's not going to ruin your strategy by any means. Okay, the last two that are big for Instagram this year that we need to talk about. Number one, mini chat. I actually also don't know. I guess the years kind of run together if this started even last year, but it has made an explosion of creators and all types of accounts being able to use like a third party option. You know, mini chat is not necessarily integrated to Instagram specifically, but it's this, if you haven't seen it, it's how people are able to kind of use that almost robotic generation to have people leave a keyword and then it will automatically send a message or a story reply, or even there's so many options. But I think we've seen this become the norm on Instagram this year. People understand it. We don't have to coach them as much in a caption of like, type out this in the caption. It's very standard of like, we're seeing this happen all over, especially with, you know, bigger accounts, influencer accounts. And it is, I have seen it be incredibly effective, not only for, I've seen it be effective a lot of ways, specifically too. I love that it just gives your interaction a boost. Even if those, very likely, if you get 500 comments, not all 500 messages are going to click over and take the action you want them to do. That's just not marketing science in general. But it gives you a huge bump of like Instagram seeing, oh, there's a lot of comments happening on this post. Great. I will take your comments however you want to leave them. Please just come in here and type what you want. But then it's also been really neat to see how it creates a place for people to have community and feel like they received a message from you. And then what I've been doing with my clients is forming those messages. I know we've done this with Savage Content clients as well, where it kind of invites them to respond back. So it doesn't feel, even though it is a, you know, more robotic way of delivering the content, that they still know a person typed this and a person is here and needs to hear back from me. And so it just creates more opportunities for conversation and stories. And I have like loved using it. It's probably one of my favorite things I've used with clients this year.
It's huge. I mean, just this week, which we have a whole episode about mini chat, so we don't have to go into a deep dive here, but like literally this week, for one client, like we saw just the significant difference of a post without mini chat and with mini chat. Of like, there are times where we'll share something and be like, you know, especially if it's like sometimes like a podcast episode, we'll be like, go listen to it, you know, like, and there's just such an engagement difference of, you know, people who will like that content, but you're not getting as many comments often. But then we tried it two different ways this week for that same client, where we had a guide that we wanted to push people to, and we had a carousel. So like on the last slide of the carousel, it said, you know, comment whatever word, and then it said it in the caption too. And I mean, we're going on like 150 comments now, I think. And so like, that's just such a huge difference, you know, for like the typical account. And then we tried it the next day just in the caption. So just like with a static photo still in the caption. I mean, and still like people are reading the caption to the end to kind of like see what that is. And they are still interacting with that a little bit lower than we saw on the carousel. But I mean, we're going on still like 50 or 60 comments, which for the typical account is crazy. Which I think is really solid.
For sure. I think that speaks to even how we've kind of like how Instagram has trained, or in some way this behavior has become trained of like, we know now to look like, oh, if I like that, I'm going to go be like, what's, you know, I'll scroll to the bottom and be
what
like,
do I comment?
And so that's just something to keep in mind of like, this is an effective strategy right now. It may not last forever, but it's a great one to consider. And you can go back and listen to that episode to kind of get the nitty gritty detail on it all. Okay. I know that I could sit here and talk about Instagram all day, but I'm going to wrap it up with this last one. And this one's kind of a fun one. I think another trend we've seen, and I've heard a lot of different creators talking about this, is kind of that shift to a more like unpolished, authentic, I'll call it like old school Instagram because I was there. I remember creating my Instagram account on the train to Chicago when I was leaving to go on a date with Matt. That is how old I am.
No way.
Yes, we used to have this Instagram where it was just like you threw up a photo and put a Valencia temp filter on it and you were good to go. So I'm seeing some of that come back with like photo dumps being super popular right now. You've kind of seen people, they'll share like whatever happened in November and just drop the photos in. And so it doesn't necessarily have like a specific topic or theme, or they're not teaching you something, but it's sharing behind the scenes and that personal touch, along with kind of that swipe ability and like people kind of hanging out on posts and wanting to roll through. Instagram has also rolled out some new carousel options. I think in 2020 to 2023, it was like reels are here. Let's dance and transition and flip our hair and do all the things. And now we're kind of coming back to, I don't think posts or carousels have ever gone anywhere. They just haven't been as prioritized. We're seeing that return of carousels being prioritized, and with the option to add text to them right in Instagram's actual app, which I love, love, love. You don't need to necessarily have, a big professionally designed carousel unless that is matching your brand, and that's great. But we see this kind of more like, just more raw and authentic way of creating carousels where you're just tapping and adding your text and scrolling along. And it's a great way to tell a story, communicate a point, but it still feels like very native to the app. And I think that just kind of adds to the user like invitation experience.
Yeah. I love it. So many great trends for Instagram this year. I think it is really interesting. We've been trying at Savage Content that last one as well, trying just those like native Instagram carousels. And they're like obviously less designed, less branded. But like you were saying, like it's really interesting because like the text styles are like the same that you would see in like Instagram stories or, something like that I think makes it really successful.
I'm curious to see how that one just morphs and changes too. Right now, I still feel like there's like a few bugs here and there with it. Sometimes it'll add like some weird glitches to your text, or like if you have HDR in your photos, then all of a sudden like your text is like glowing. And so again, I'm like, dear Instagram. But I also love that that's just the nature of the app, is like they'll roll stuff out. We all try it. Everybody's like, yeah, we're still figuring this out. And it'll become normal in, a few months. So it's kind of fun to see happen.
Yeah, the one that I did try this week, or one of the ones that we posted this week, is they dropped like a shadow behind all of the text. Like it wasn't like that on the preview, but then like it like darkened half the image. But the post is performing really well, so we were like, it's fine.
There you go. Here's the quick hack on that for anyone else who's having this issue. It's if your HDR is on in your camera photos. And so this is such a silly hack, but I'm all about the workaround. You just need to screenshot the photo instead of using the original photo. Then you can go in and use it if you really care about that. Again, I don't think this is something we have to camp out on forever, but if you care about that visual presentation, that's the workaround.
Wow. No, I did not go down like the Google rabbit hole for it this week. So that is good to know.
That's just me trying it. I was like, I had it happen for a client. I did not like how it looked. And so I was like, I just wonder what would happen if I screenshot it. And it fixed it. So there you go.
Wow. That actually is super helpful. That's good to know.
There you go.
Coming in clutch with the tips. I like it. Okay. Well, let's jump from Instagram to some of the other trends that we saw at Curious Social and at Savage Content. We, focus a lot on, content marketing that connects to, different aspects of how the brand is communicating with its audience. So as much as possible, we use the language here at Savage Content of like integrated content marketing, of like, we want to give people as many touches with your brand as possible. We want them to interact with you on social. We want them to see your blog. We want them to see your emails. We want your emails to lead people to a blog and your blog to lead people to social, and for all of those things to be connected. And just as much as we've seen positive trends on Instagram, as we think about some of those other channels, podcast, email, blog, primarily, I don't know that we've seen a lot of like new things this year, but it has been really interesting that we have still seen some really like positive trends across the board. So we've been like doubling down on podcasts this year, it feels like, at Savage Content. But I want to jump over to podcasts first. Really interesting. So there's some new data that came out. I think it was last month. The data is technically from most recently in October of this year, but it is showing that podcast listenership is still going up this year. it has consistently been going up for the most part for like the last 10 to 15 years, really. But where like 10 years ago, if you look at this chart from like this company called Edison Research along with Spotify, 10 years ago, if you asked somebody like, have you listened to a podcast in the last month? 10% of people were saying yes. This year, if you ask that same question, 47% of people are saying yes. And even in the last like 2 to 4 years, if you've asked that question, it's gone up from 40% to 47% this year. So really interesting trends, because I feel like there's a lot of people who feel this pressure as like, just podcasts have been around for a while. And it's the same thing that we'll talk about with blogs, but it's like, they've been around for a while. People are like, I don't know, like they're probably not like as big of a thing, but we see consistently that like people are listening to them, and there's more options than ever before, and there's way more podcasts that exist, which make it much more like competitive for people's attention. But they are still a very strategic outlet, when it comes to content. And I found that like just very interesting to see that.
Yeah, I just would not have even maybe been able to like guess what those numbers would have been. And it's super interesting. Yeah. I wonder too, like you see those numbers increasing of like how likely you are to listen to a podcast. Yes, there are more out there, but I also think people are more trained or more, likely to listen to one. Like it doesn't feel, I remember when podcasts were like kind of a new thing, and maybe like you weren't quite sure how to like access them or find them, or just like, where does that fit in my daily routine? And now, I mean, I know I listen to a podcast every single time I go on a walk. It's just kind of this like normal thing we do. So I can totally see why, if I hadn't already believed that they were so important in your strategy, that it just makes sense. It's not too late to start one. It's not that you should stop one if you've had one. It's still a viable part of your strategy.
Yeah. And I think another trend that we've seen on the podcast side is that we've actually seen like that trend of, steady listenership. I know we've seen that for both video and audio podcasts. And so I think that a lot of people feel this pressure, like if they're going to have a podcast that like, it has to be really high production, that has to be like, really like high quality, like video added to it, or, some like super, super creative kind of take on a podcast. Like right now at Savage Content, we're managing shows all across the spectrum. Like we have high production shows that are like literally taking 20 hours of time to like to finish and publish one episode. And then all the way down to like really low production shows of people, who are keeping it simple, but just like want to use it as an outlet for, simpler conversations. The largest of those shows, I should say, exist on both of those spectrums. So we have really simple shows, that have over 1 million total listens. We have really complex shows that, are sitting around like 6,000 to 10,000 total listens. Both of those are succeeding in what they're trying to accomplish, and are engaging people in the ways that they're trying to do that. But there are listener bases for any kind of podcast that could be done. So I think that's been just an interesting trend overall. Like you're seeing a lot more about video podcasts. And I will say, when it comes to social content that you can pull from a video podcast, I think that you would say the same, Kelsey. Like we do see that content perform better on social media. But when it comes to the podcast itself, we haven't seen a humongous difference on listenership. The last trend I wanted to highlight on podcasts is that there has been a lot of progress made on most podcast hosts for dynamic content capabilities as well. So that's something that's been generally available for a long time, but that a lot of podcast hosts have doubled down on this year. So Buzzsprout is the primary one that we use, but there's also some other, big ones, Captivate or Libsyn. There's more dynamic options for pre-roll advertisements or announcements. You can put something in the middle of an episode, at the end of an episode, and it gives podcasters a lot of flexibility, especially if they're trying to advertise on their podcast, whether it's their own offer or advertise something for a different company, where like you can sell things on a time-bound basis rather than just like on a number of episodes. And you can be swapping out that content all the time, so that if people go back to old episodes, you're able to just easily put on a pre-roll ad for a timely offer that you have right now, or something that you are selling for, or an ad spot that you sold for another company, things like that. So I think that's been a really positive trend on the podcast side as well.
Yeah. I honestly feel like we could do episodes where I talk about Instagram forever and then you talk about podcasts forever. And these are like these spots. It's so funny.
We got excited.
I do agree with what you were saying earlier too, though, about like just to encourage our listeners. There is an audience base for whatever one feels right to you. I think that is so true in this day and age of people being even more likely to listen to podcasts. Pick the one that feels like the most exciting or the most reachable or, available to you. Don't not make something just because you don't feel like you can create it at XYZ level. You can always, we've seen even some of your clients like shift into, they start with an audio and then they add on the video. But I think there's sometimes, I know I felt this kind of this myth of like, I've got to have all of this really fancy stuff to be able to make a podcast. And that's just
we've seen a similar trend on the blog front. And so just like where podcasts, you're like, oh, I don't know if like these are still like, engaging or like, are there too many, things out there for me to even have a place here? I know a lot of people feel that way with blogs. And, there's not, when you think about a blog, it's like there's only so many new things that could come out with it. So it's not like Instagram where you're like, oh, I have these new stickers that I can put on, or I have these new features, different things like that. Although on, some websites is more flexibility than others. But with that, like we still continue to see blogs make a difference. And, there's always kind of companies or brands that will kind of pull away from that because it feels traditional. But like we see multiple stories of clients, this past year who have doubled down on blog content and seen a significant increase in website traffic as a result. I mean, we have one client who was barely posting blogs, and across their website, I mean, they were probably having like 20 to 40 visits a week, like a very kind of like small sort of steady flow of traffic for their company. And they didn't need like a lot for the type of company that they were and the type of offer that they had is more of a high ticket offer. But when they doubled down on blog content and they started posting between just like 2 to 4 blogs every month, but by being strategic about both the keywords that they were targeting and really breaking down these big offers that they had into questions that people were asking about them or about that topic. They went from that, kind of low traffic of 20 to 40 people all the way up to, I mean, they've been seeing hundreds of people visit their website each month. And that is through the blogs that they have been publishing. And so even though blogs have been around for a crazy long time, they still are a great on-ramp for people to discover your brand and just kind of like get connected and get onto your website.
Yeah. I was just recently at a social media conference specifically for affiliate marketing, kind of more in that influencer role. And there were multiple creators there who talked about their blog being a key generator of income. Some of them even higher than social. And so I think it just, again, goes to show there is an audience base, for all of these different types of content, especially because all of them are rooted in, creating on-ramps for people to be able to know you and like you and trust you and, find value from you. And when you have multiple places for them to do that, it only just, exponentially kind of creates that snowball effect. So I still love to read blogs myself. So I can totally see why, again, they haven't gone anywhere. I just think it's a myth that's easy to start to perpetuate.
Yeah, it's been interesting on the blog front too. Is Google they actually made some like really significant updates on how they're ranking blogs and pages and websites in the past year. And so, I say that there's not that much that's different. That was actually something very big that happened in the past year that has actually been a little bit controversial. Like there's been a lot of people who had really high ranking pages who, as a result of the changes that Google's made, have dropped off of the first page of Google. But there's people who have seen the exact opposite is that, before where they didn't have as much of a chance to rank based on the other websites, the kind of the competitiveness of, of something specific. They've had, more opportunity as a result. And so what they've started kind of like putting more emphasis on is the amount that a website is being updated. So it makes just having a blog strategy more strategic and important than ever before, because just the simple act of like regularly updating your website shows the search engine that like this is a website that is being updated regularly. This is kind of an active place to send people. at the same time, I mean, now just the way that they're able to crawl content and understand content just with, the capabilities of technology in general that continue to increase, but they're able to just kind of organize, like, is this website an actual expert about what's being talked about? We just did a keyword research project for a realty company who, that's obviously like very hyper local content. And, it's like a big difference. Like, they have a big advantage over something like Zillow now with these updates from Google, because they are actually based in the community that they're trying to sell for. So like content that they create about like things to do around fill in the blank city, or, the best golf courses in fill in the blank city, that might be kind of like outside of just home specific, but kind of get people into like, we know this area, we are the kind of like go-to experts for this area. Those things are great opportunities for them to really create content that performs well.
That's so interesting with all of the different rankings and just, ways things shift and also stay the same. When we think about our, that integrated content marketing strategy and having, all of our different content engines, bringing people to kind of the same place. We talked about social. Well, we talked about Instagram. We talked about podcasts and blogs and email. I mean, email is like the staple content champion. Like, it is, the steady Eddie who's always been there. I think that email can feel very intimidating, of like something you have to keep up with. But we tell people all the time, it's your content engine that you own. If Instagram glitches out tomorrow, your email list is there and you own it. And so this is definitely, I don't feel like one that people feel as those myths aren't perpetuated as much, that it's like, a bygone content engine. But what I have loved seeing this year is the way that same principle has proved itself true of when you have multiple content engines pointing to the same thing, there is just something that happens than if you just have like a one-way exchange of content. I just had a situation recently with a client who kind of is starting a new thing from the ground up. And so we're sharing, content to social, we're sending monthly newsletters, and kind of bringing that, from nothing to something. And that can feel a little intimidating at times, but it was really rewarding to see, kind of the second email we sent out. One of the key things that we featured inside the email was an Instagram post. And, the picture was pretty big. They just have to click on it. We saw a giant spike in their Instagram followers. I'm talking like over hundreds of more followers over a weekend. And it was specifically tied to that email going out, where if, people may not have known they were on social yet, but they recognize the name of the person, they get the email, they open it, they click, oh, now we're on your Instagram. Oh, now we're following. And here you are, bringing people into that web of Instagram content. And so that was just really exciting to see, like, this thing we talk about all the time. It really does happen.
Yeah, it makes a difference. I mean, email is such an interesting one because like you are able to use it, like I in our last episode, I shared about a newsletter that I signed up for, and it was like very just like interesting to read. And it's like email itself can be so value driven without leading people other places. And at the same time, it's also like one of the most effective like content delivery platforms, I would call it, like where you can like take a new blog and you can take a social post that's performing well and deliver it directly to someone's inbox to just say like, this has been interesting to a lot of people. It would be interesting to you. And I think that just like sets it apart in a really important way. Like, it just is such a valuable thing to be building your email list and using it, consistently. And just in general, I know we've had multiple clients in this past year specifically, like continue to have between like 40 and 60% open rates for their emails, which, I mean, industry average that, we typically see is like most companies are shooting for 20 to 30%. And that just, to me, has just shown that like email is just as strong as it's always been as well. Like, it has often been described as like the most personal form of marketing. And, that changes a little bit with text marketing and, different types of things that, that is available now. But I mean, that people are still engaging, like they are opening content, they're clicking content in emails, and it is just as valuable for your brand as it has ever been.
Yeah. I think it is such a personal way, like you said, to deliver content. And I know I have those specific newsletters where I'm like, I don't open that email until I'm sitting down and I have my coffee.
I'm ready.
And I read it like it's, it's like a conversation with a friend. And so I think that style of content is just, it proves to be true that people, still want to open it, consume it, interact with it. And it's really fun to create and write too.
2024 has been a crazy year.
It really has. I don't think either of us would have said we knew what 2024 was bringing us. So here we are.
No, but I feel excited about some of the trends that we've seen, talked about today of, just from Instagram to even just the things in podcasts and emails and blogs, and just how we've continued to just see. I mean, it all comes back to the fact that content marketing works, and we're seeing that. There is, different takes on each of these platforms and, different opportunities that can be leveraged. But content marketing continues to just be effective. And I know that's why you and I both love it, is it's, just fun that we can take this value that we have to offer and just kind of even just use our personalities to build businesses and build brands and build organizations. I mean, that's just such a unique thing that is possible today. And I think just looking at these trends and just kind of seeing all of sort of the positive things that are happening is very exciting. I think to even just look ahead to 2025 and just think of even more of are we going to see podcast listenership increase even more? Will it be above 50% next year? Same thing with Instagram is what new features are we going to have that we haven't been able to have lately? And so more than ever before, I mean, if you are not doubling down on content marketing, I mean, I think that you absolutely should be, whether you work with our companies or not, you absolutely should be just leveraging these platforms for the opportunities that they can provide.
I totally agree. And at the same time, I think it can be really easy to listen to an episode like this and think, I'm not using any of that. And so why even start? And that would never be the advice that either one of us would give to you. Whatever jumped out at you from this episode, I know there was something that you were like, oh, that's kind of fun, or oh, that's interesting. Take one, take two, go ahead and, just as this episode wraps up, even open a note in your phone and just throw a couple ideas in there. And then when it's time for goal setting, there you go. You already have yours written down. So leave the overwhelm, take what's inspired you, definitely capitalize on just the opportunities that are there for you on all these different content engines. Pick one that feels right to you and go for it. And we can't wait to see what new things happen for you and what new things we get to share at the end of next year as we head into the new year.
Love it. All right. We'll see you next time on Marketing Should Be Fun.